Right. Well, by my clock, it is 3 o'clock p.m. So I would like to take this time to officially call this meeting to order, the Subcommittee on Campus Climate for the President's Task Force on Anti-Racism, Equity, and Inclusion. So I would like to welcome everyone. It's great to see all the committee members again. And at this time, I'd like to welcome any attendees as well that are on Zoom today listening in. And we would, of course, also like to welcome anyone who is interested in public comment. You can check the chat to see how you can do that in a few minutes. So welcome, everyone. So next, I'll go ahead and move into subcommittee chair remarks. And really what I wanted to start with today is just a thank you. Thank you all for continuing to engage in this conversation. I am hoping to have a fruitful conversation today. I have a series of questions that I would love to pose to the group today. And then of course, later on in our meeting, we'll look forward to the opportunity to really engage the subcommittee in an open forum. But that is it for my subcommittee chair remarks at this time. And so I do want to make sure we take the time to recognize anyone from the public that wishes to come and speak. And before I do that, I would like to just take the time to remind our subcommittee facilitators and our group and members that our meetings are open to the public, and we welcome input through public comment, letters, or email correspondence. If there is a concern regarding the nature of our work, our objectives, issues we may have overlooked, or the direction of our conversations, we have an established protocol that lends itself to candidness and transparency. And so we want to make sure that we continue to remind not only our committee members, but the facilitators that come and join us, not today, but in our later meetings, but also anyone who is here for public comment. We just wanted to make sure that we reiterated that. And so at this time, I will defer to anyone who would like to speak in public comment. And I know we got to public comment pretty quickly, so I'll give just a minute to allow anyone to respond to Jimmy to let them know if they want to speak. So it looks like I see one hand raised, so I think we may have a public comment coming here shortly. So appreciate everybody's patience. Give us 1 second.
Amy, you should be able to speak. If you'd like to, you can unmute yourself.
I think that was an accident.
Okay. Well, we don't have any requests for public comment.
Okay. Thank you, Jimmy. I appreciate that. So I think we'll go ahead and move today then. So one of the things that I really wanted to take a deeper dive in today are the objectives of the committee. And so there are 6 objectives that we have discussed thus far. And really what I wanted to do today was take an opportunity to do a deeper dive. I'm not sure how many of you had an opportunity to join the larger task force meeting that we had a couple of weeks ago, but there were certainly some things that came up there that I wanted to bring back to this committee because I think it's relevant to the work that we are expected to do and relevant to the work that I think we will carry out during our time together with this campus climate subcommittee. So first things first, I did want to make sure if you have not had an opportunity to see, I was able to locate the 2013 student campus climate survey, and I have shared that with the committee. My full disclaimer is that I did not work on that campus climate survey. So in terms of speaking to the analysis or some of the context behind some of the information, I'm limited. I have participated in campus climate surveys before, so I can certainly speak in general terms, but that was definitely a document that not only did I want to make sure that the subcommittee had an opportunity to see, but I also wanted to let you know that I have shared that information widely with several people that came to public comment previously requesting access to that information. So we've made that information available on the Division of Student Affairs website. We've also made it available here, and anyone who would like access to that, we are happy to make it available and share that information with them. So my hope is that if you haven't already, that you will have an opportunity to review that. I think that it could inform some of the work that we will be doing going forward. And also, once we decide on our next steps for our upcoming campus climate survey, I am hopeful that we will be able to then benchmark and look at really what has happened in the last 8 years to see if there are any pieces that are still the same, or if there are some areas where we have grown tremendously. But in thinking about the campus climate survey, so one of the pieces that I really wanted to bring to this group were a couple of comments that came up at the larger task force committee. And that was who should be included in the campus climate survey. And so obviously we know that we have already spoken about students, faculty, and staff. But one of the comments that came up at the larger committee meeting was that we should also consider alumni in these efforts as well. And so definitely we'll want an opportunity to hear a little bit more from the group when the time is right to really kind of speak to where alumni fit in this process and how we can incorporate them. A few other things that are really just some questions I want to pose to the group. I want to think about who should provide this campus climate survey for us. I can provide some information on a couple of different vendors that we've used in the past, but certainly I will look to the subcommittee as well if there are some groups that you have worked with, or if there's a particular instrument you have worked with that you feel works well, I certainly will welcome you to bring that to the table and be part of the discussion. But I definitely want to just make sure we continue to talk that through. Some other pieces that I will want to make sure that we think about is so that we avoid the challenge that we had this time of the campus climate survey not being readily available. Who should be the gatekeeper, and where should we keep this information so that it is readily available to the public, to our students, faculty, staff, any visitors, any potential future employees, anyone who would like to see that, just really wanting to think through where this document or these documents can live. And then the last piece that I'll say on the campus climate survey is for those who have worked with statistics and data sets, you likely know that when you're working with a large group, you don't always survey the entire population. And so one of the pieces that I will want us to flesh out for our conversation is it realistic to survey all students, all faculty, all staff, and if we include alumni as well in these efforts? And so there are some nuances that we can talk through as to why I'm asking that question. That's something that I will want to talk through as well. A couple of other things that I want to mention, because I want to make sure we are staying on the agenda, because I don't want to mix up the discussion of the objectives and the open forum. So I will make sure I come back and revisit some of these questions. So I'm going to ask lots of questions, and then we're going to go into open forum, and then we will talk them through. So I'll just kind of walk you through all the questions as well. And so secondly, this is what I just mentioned, is develop a central means of collecting, maintaining, and accessing this data. So really thinking about, should it be institutional research? Should it be human resources? Should it be the Division of Student Affairs? Should it be someone else? Or should it be everyone? Should we make sure this information is available in all these different locations so that anyone going to look for this information will have multiple outlets that they can use and multiple means they can use in order to gather this information? So third is provide a set of concrete, achievable actions that FSU, that will make FSU a more diverse and inclusive community. My pointed question there is, what does that mean? I really want us to think through what does that objective mean? How do we reach that? And I really want to have a robust conversation on that as well. Recommend a series of programmatic events focused on anti-racism that will allow us to collaborate with our community partners and FAMU in particular. I really want to talk about how we do that. Some of that is already happening. I'm happy to share with you that there actually have been a couple of events that have happened since the last committee meeting, and people are already reaching out. So some of this work is starting to happen. I would love to hear from others on some of the efforts as well. But without us even going into a deeper conversation about this, we are starting to learn that there are some groups that are already moving forward with making some of these programmatic events happen, even during these COVID times. To work with FSU PD to learn about the different trainings that they engage in. Certainly this is a conversation I want to engage FSU PD, and we're fortunate enough that we have Lieutenant Washington on the call as well. But we should consider maybe having the officer that is responsible for training for FSU PD actually come and talk to the group and share with us the different trainings that they offer and the trainings that officers go through. And I'm sure that Lieutenant Washington can also add to that conversation as well. And then lastly, to work with the history department on this first year learning module. I have learned that these efforts are already in effect and moving forward. And so I would love to know from the subcommittee, what role will we play in that? Will we meet with them and ask how we can support? Will we want to be a part of that? Just really looking to see how we can not reinvent the wheel, but how we can support efforts that are already happening. And also just make sure we're informed about what is happening so we can also help be ambassadors to share that information. So I know that was a lot of information in a short amount of time, but I really wanted to get to the point where we could actually engage in the conversation. So at this point in the agenda, I want to go ahead and move into subcommittee open forum so that we can actually start to address some of the questions that I posed. And so we'd love to go back and really start with the campus climate survey. Would love to hear from the committee if you had an opportunity to review it, or just in general with some of the questions that I posed, specifically, what about including active alumni and others in this campus climate survey, and how to really get this information out. So with that, I'll actually go ahead and turn it over to any of the subcommittee that has any thoughts or want to jump in.
Can I get when I was reading over it, a clarifying point, those numbers, are they out of 10? So like when there's like a 5.63, does that just mean everybody's like, I'm in the middle about like whatever the question was posed? Is that the metric on that? Because I didn't know if I just missed it, or is that how that was measured, if you're aware?
So Rawan, thank you for asking that question. That's actually one of the same questions that I had and that I posed as well. I believe the assumption is that it's out of 10. That is pretty standard. I am seeking clarification on that, but typically in this case, that would be an out of 10, a Likert scale out of 10. And so you're absolutely right. If you see a 5.5 or a 6, that means that we're hovering somewhere right there in the middle.
Brandon, I had a question, unless I saw this wrong. Am I correct that there were only 520 responses on that last time and 3,500 surveys distributed?
So Tom, that sounds about right. And unfortunately, that is a typical response rate. And so one of the things that we will want to make sure that we address is how do we get the highest response rate we can potentially get. And that also goes back to that other question that I posed of, is it realistic that we can survey every individual, or do we choose a sample size? Certainly, you know, that's open to conversation, but you know, typically you're hoping for the largest response rate that you possibly can get. But unfortunately, that is somewhat of a standard response.
Yeah, so my reaction to that is we need to do better and have a bigger sample than that, given we're talking about 42,000 students and 7,000 or 8,000 faculty and staff. I guess it probably can't be mandated. I think of some of the HR training that we're required to do as employees. I mean, right now we've got one related to mental health training that all staff have to do. So I don't know if it could get to that, but it seems like the number could be higher. Just as an FYI, the Alumni Association a couple of times in the last few years has commissioned an alumni attitude survey, which that's an outside vendor that does that, and it's not specific to diversity and inclusion. I don't even recall if there are EDI related questions there, but that might be an option. And I know they've had challenges with response rate too. I think in this case, and I can't speak for Julie Decker and Alumni Association, but whatever this survey looks like, the Alumni Association could potentially distribute it to, whether it's a subset. We'd have to decide how many opinions are we seeking from our alumni group? How big a sample do we need there?
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that.
Hey, it's Craig. So my thought is, I have two things to think about actually. So looking over the assessment tool that it is, it's obviously very clearly geared towards students. And so we would have to be very conscientious about the framing of it, so that would there be either separate surveys for each of the constituent groups, or would there be parts within the survey that would sort of fan out, diverge for different constituent groups, or do we send the same survey to all the groups? And I guess my second point is, if we're doing a campus climate survey, thinking very intentionally, I like the idea of alumni being included, but then we have to think very specifically about what is it we'll be wanting from them in terms of information to gauge the current campus climate. So are we trying to get something longitudinal? Are we trying to get their feelings from when they were on campus? In which case we have to think about, like contacting the alumni like in time blocks, so that we have like that clear outcome. Or are we wanting to have their perception of how it is right now as alumni from what they see from wherever they are? And I've been thinking about the alumni thing too, and that was just sort of my takeaway from it.
And Craig, I think those are fair questions that I think we need to have a bigger conversation about. To respond to your question about being intentional in terms of the questions that are being asked, or whether or not we do separate surveys or one bigger survey with more focused questions, I think that's something that we're really going to have to talk through and really look at the different options we're going to have for an or the company or vendor that we're going to work with to provide this. Because what I'll tell you in my experience in the past, typically each survey is focused on a certain population. So I've not had a need in the past, because my role has been specifically with students, to provide a survey that spoke to different populations. But I'm sure there is someone out there that can probably provide that. Or if we're going to send it out as separate surveys, that's something I think we need to talk through. And that's really one of the roles of the subcommittee, will be to determine the best way to gather that information. And I think that if it is the desire of the committee that these be individual surveys, that is something we can absolutely talk through to see what it looks like. But I think one of the things we need to do before we get to that point is really look and see what's out there. And I'm certainly happy to give you at least two of the bigger players in kind of the campus climate survey world that we can look at and see if either of them have potentially what we might be looking for. But I think the mixing and mingling of faculty, staff, alumni, and students is going to be the trickier place. But I also know that there are companies out there that they will build out the assessment the way that you need it. And if you need to break it up into segments, they likely can do that as well.
My question is, or I guess a thought, because like thinking of things being mandated was a big topic of conversation, at least recently, in regards to many things. Specifically, the one that we've engaged in as students is mandating trainings and courses were mandated. That was very popular, but when trainings wanted to be mandated, it became aware to people that when you mandate something, it can have a reverse effect. So when I'm thinking of this campus climate survey, at least in a student room, I don't know how much you can mandate adults, and I don't know how those processes work. But if this was something mandated on a student account to be like a hold before we register, and again, at least in a student regard, whether this is a survey across the different groups of alumni, staff, faculty, and students, or it's just a student-specific one. Is there a possibility that mandating it would create a negative effect because people would just blow through it and we would get skewed results, or the mandation would give us the more numbers that we need, and like looking at mandation should be something that we want to pursue?
Rawan, I think that's also a fair question because you're right, it could go either way. Obviously making something mandatory often has an effect that you will find less than desirable. We also, as a university, I know we really try to focus on not putting holes on students' accounts because of the other implications of all the things that it could impact in terms of a student being able to access different things. And so I know that we want to try to avoid that, but I agree with you. How do we maximize our efforts? How do we get the most amount of people, and in particular students who, sometimes we do have a challenge reaching, especially when we're asking them to complete a survey or some type of assessment, especially if it's lengthy. So that is something we'll also need to look at as well. The surveys, they tend to be fairly lengthy because they really are trying to assess and gather information to really be able to provide you a full analysis of the climate of your campus. And so they need more than 5 questions to get to that. But survey fatigue is also a real thing. So we'll have to be very strategic in terms of when we roll this out. There is a survey committee on campus that can help us with that. They really look at the bigger surveys and when they're going out to make sure we're not overlapping with another survey, because that tends to have a negative effect as well. If people are completing the surveys, they tend to choose, if there are multiple surveys out at one time, they'll choose one or the other, or they'll do part of one and just not complete it. And so I think it's going to be an all-around effort to really get the word out. I think that obviously having the invitation to complete the survey coming from the president of the university would be ideal, because that will get some attention. But I think there are definitely multiple ways that we can work on that. And, I think we have a great diverse group of people on this subcommittee as well that can also help us hit different corners of the campus, which I think will be very important as well.
Brandon, this is Roxanne. Maxine Montgomery makes a good point that one of the ways to get student buy-in is to make the group aware of the stakes involved in a survey. And I was wondering if we could have like some kind of marketing campaign, or bring in the folks. I mean, FSU is really good at marketing. So bring in the folks to say like, what are the possible ways of ramping out that kind of survey, and getting folks, because the other piece, like you said, survey fatigue, we have to align it with when other folks are sending out the survey. And then I don't know if this is the case for students. Rowan would probably be able to answer this question, but I know faculty feel, kind of defeated in the sense of, we've done these kinds of surveys before. What has been done? I can't speak for staff, but I wonder if staff have the same feelings. So this sense of, not only are we surveying because we want to get a sense of what's happening, but we want to do something with this data so that we really have their commitment and their sense of trust that the data is going to be used to make the climate better. And how do we change that perception? I don't know. I wish I had the answer to that, but contemplating how we could market that, or maybe marketing is a manipulative word, but how we could make that better so people feel the buy-in.
No, I absolutely think we're going to have to use all means and methods. We have found success, at least within student affairs, of reaching students through different marketing campaigns and really meeting students where they are. And so that's advertising through all the social media forums. That's being on Facebook, that's being on Instagram, tweeting out about it. I think that not everyone needs an incentive to complete this, but certainly incentives are helpful. And I don't think that's just for students. I think, you know, even if you look at some of the other opportunities to complete surveys right now, it might be you know, you get access to X, Y, and Z, or, you know, you get I don't know, a free iPad or something. I think is one of the ones I saw recently on one of the requests for surveys. So I do agree with you that I think there is often this mindset that why should I complete this if no one's going to do anything with it? So that's why I think it's going to be important for us to over communicate, and you know, I think in this case redundancy will be good. If we can just communicate along the way and keep communicating, we hear you, we heard you, and now we're doing something about it. So we can't just collect this information and sit it on a shelf, which I'm sure, you know, it sounds like you've heard some of the same concerns of you collected all that information on me, but I don't see any changes. And so I do think we'll have to make sure that we are sharing out information about the ways in which we responded and some of the things that came out of the survey and some of the efforts that we're putting forward. I think often we go straight into just responding and everybody's doing the work, but we're not centrally communicating that out. And so I think that certainly is a point well taken, that we'll need to look at all those different facets.
And I think she made a good point, at least. And I know how this would reach students because we're even seeing it now. Students were a cohort galvanized like heck 2 months ago. Now, not at the fault of nobody, there's classes, there's fatigue. We all saw how the debate looked last night. I was tired, and I didn't even watch the whole thing. So those intermixing things will produce that fatigue that Roxanne, you're talking about, that like, why should I fill this out? And to me, I think at least, and we're one subcommittee of 3, which I think will make this task easy, that when this survey comes out, to at least implement. And I understand how marketing can be negatively connotated, but it's what we mean, that you tell students, at least at the very minimum, but also faculty, if it'll get them, that we have a campus survey because something has been happening for centuries, but this summer it came to a boiling point. We created this, but we're also doing X, Y, and Z as well. So you don't just think we're getting your feedback on a survey. You know, we're implementing the historical lesson for freshmen. You know, the diversity training task force is doing their thing. Historical legacy, the Epps statue is gone. There are other things, or they're working on where it's going to go. There are other things that we completed, and that's obviously not going to be like on the front page of the survey, but it's a general over realizing that as you do take steps outside and months away, people lose their attention span, because 2020 attention spans are this big. But that reinforcing that we have multiple of things, and this is just one part into it. Not just another thing to tell students, like, don't drink alcohol and like you skip through the hazing module.
Oh, we lost her.
Marketing, I know we'll get through to students.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Rowan. Other thoughts on the campus climate survey?
The other piece that I wanted to bring up is this idea of for surveys and for quantitative data, folks who are marginalized get lost in that data. So I just want to reiterate the idea of listening sessions or focus groups or something like that, particularly with populations at the university who've been telling us through like emails or in public comment the issues that are rising up and surfacing, because we might not see a large number of them in the survey because they're marginalized, they're isolated, and they're invisible already. So how do we access those groups who might not be in the big statistical numbers?
Absolutely. So no, Roxanne, thank you for bringing that up. I know one of the challenges that we often have as staff is that we still have a large group of staff in particular that don't use computers. That, you know, I'm thinking specifically about some of our frontline workers, our maintenance and custodial workers that we don't want to leave out. And so when they're coming into work and they're doing hands-on work and they're not sitting behind a computer, or they don't have access to a central computer and they're not going to go to a computer and take a survey that takes half an hour, how do you gather that information? So in that respect, I do think that the listening sessions and the focus groups, you know, even if that means coming out on the second shift to sit with the group and have a conversation and really hear from them on their experiences, because I think it's important to make sure that we hear from everyone. And in particular, those groups, they tend to not be as noticeable in many of the surveys that we complete on campus, either because they didn't know about it or they didn't have a way to share that information. But I can assure you that they have thoughts, and they have opinions, and they have feedback that they can provide us that will help this university be better. So absolutely.
The other, I know I'm taking up a lot of time. The other one is the 2013 survey. It looks like it was only open for 2 weeks, and I believe it was in November. So I think the timing of the survey, and I don't know what's an appropriate time to leave it open, but knowing like when people are overwhelmed, I feel like November is a rough time, but I don't know if there's a better time. So being strategic about when we release it and how long we leave it open and send reminders and things like that.
Absolutely. Being intentional and strategic in how we do this, certainly I think should stay at the forefront of all of our minds as we work through this. So absolutely.
Brandon, I don't know if this is a good idea or a bad idea, but I'll throw it out in regard to the marketing question that was raised previously. The university doesn't really do anything around its Heritage Day, but that day is January 24th. And I don't know how long, how far out we're looking to try and get this constructed and then commissioned. But as we're talking about the evolution of our institution, there might be a way to tie it to that day and open the window around, our Founders Day, which is January 24th.
Appreciate that, Tom. Well, Tom, you bring up a good point though, in terms of timeline. Here soon, I think we will need to really dive a little deeper into the conversation about the timeline and when we want to roll this out. I was personally thinking that around the beginning of the year, the kind of, open up right after the new year would be ideal. But a lot of that's going to depend on how quickly we can move in securing, actually vetting a couple of different options and really agreeing on one that, or multiple that might meet the needs of what we're really trying to do here. Because, as I've been sitting here thinking about this while we talk about it, if we may find that there are certain vendors out there that do a much better job surveying faculty, and that might be different from, one that might survey students or staff or even our alumni. And so I think that we definitely need to bring Julie Decker, an alumni, I think, to the conversation, because to Tom's point, they may very well have a method that they currently use to engage the alumni. But I think it was Craig that asked the question of how do we do that? And how are we going to navigate through connecting to our alumni and the intentionality behind, are we looking at the highly engaged alumni, those that are on courtesy appointments? Are we looking for others that fall in a certain category? So I think we will need to really think about which alumni we're targeting, because I think for anyone who's ever been to a graduation, at the end of graduation, they always talk about how many alumni we have. And if I'm not mistaken, that's several 100,000. And so I don't know that it'd be realistic to survey all of them. So I think we do need to think about, when we look at alumni, what populations are we looking at, or how do we want to engage that group? So I will definitely take note of that.
One suggestion there, Brandon, when you look in talking with Julie, I mean, they have several affinity groups, affinity is not the right word, I'm struggling to come up with it, but they have several constituency groups that are already actively engaged. And so if you work through those groups, you're going to get a better response rate. To your point, yeah, we're at like 370,000 alumni. We don't have email addresses for that number. That number is probably fewer than probably 175,000 to 200,000. Obviously, a number of our alums that came through earlier are deceased. That's part of the answer to the question, why don't we have email addresses? But that is the number.
Gotcha. Thank you. So other thoughts on the campus climate survey before we move to the next point?
The last point I would just hit, just to reassure this, even though I'm sure it's assumed, is in this work of whether it's reaching out or formulating, like, to not recreate the wheel again, anything that is needed in effort, as a task force member, you can always send it my way, and I'm sure to the rest of the ways on the email. So everything is not on Dr. Bowden's shoulders. We're here to do that work with you. So having that in mind so we can get that on as early as a timeline as possible, I think is huge.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to throw in, I think when we're thinking about scoping out which tool to use, to me, the most user-friendly, the better. And for me, filling out these surveys, knowing ahead of time how much time it's anticipated to take is kind of key. I got stuck in one the other day that was like 45 minutes long. So just I think part of our marketing and part of our presentation to people, if we can think ahead and think through the barriers and make sure that we've accommodated for that. And then the other thing that I was thinking of, I would like to include alumni, being an alumni. I think that would be important. And I kind of wonder, how we could get voices who aren't necessarily engaged already in the Alumni Association, and also maybe find ways that we could engage them in the future that they would be willing to help. And then the other thing is, one thing that I would love for us to keep in mind as we're developing this is the inclusion of those with disabilities as well, and the things that bring about equity and make things equitable for our students in need and our students with disabilities and alumni with disabilities, faculty, staff, everybody. So that's just kind of what I was thinking.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nan. So that actually brings up another great point and a question I'd love to pose to the group. As we think about all these different populations that we want to hit in terms of getting this survey out and really getting this feedback, one of the things that we should probably do is really start to think about a framework for the Campus Climate Survey. And, I wonder, are we doing ourselves a disservice if we're thinking in terms of trying to fit all this into one survey, or do we go to the, would you say, content experts, if you will? So do we look at student affairs and say, so student affairs, we really need you to focus on the student campus climate survey? And then do we work with human resources and say, can you focus on the faculty and staff survey? Do we work with the alumni center and say, can you focus on the alumni for us? And then really try to bring all those pieces together. And then Nan, to your point, typically what we're able to do is you have subsets within the campus climate survey. So you can really kind of hone in on religion, ability, and all these different subsets. So you do typically have those abilities. Most campus climate surveys also give you the option of adding your own institution specific questions. And so I think that'll be very important for us to really know about Florida State and who we are. And then I think there's a question of, do we want to work with a company that would allow us to benchmark against other institutions, or is it only important for us to really know who Florida State is? And so as we continue to work through that, I think we need to be thinking about that as well. But also as we think about the fact that we are going to be providing, updates along the way for the president to consider, I definitely think that one of the things we could go ahead and start working towards is thinking about a framework for the campus climate survey. What do we want this to look like? What do we feel like we need to be part of this? Because I don't want it to feel like, every time we're just talking about the same thing over and over. I definitely want to make sure we're moving this forward. But I really wanted to hold off on this conversation until you had an opportunity to at least get access to the 2013 survey, because I really thought it could help inform how we move forward and some of the decisions that we make. But I definitely think one of those next steps for us will be to develop that framework, because we still have a little time to determine, what company or what vendor we would like to use. But I will throw out there two of the groups that I've worked with in the past, and I can provide this an email later, but it's EBI. So EBI, Sky Factor, is one that we've used. And then there's also HERI, which is the Higher Education Research Institute. And both have provided campus climate surveys for Florida State in the past. we've used HERI for the last 30 years for a freshman survey, but also some other surveys. But I did see recently that they have some diversity and inclusion related campus climate type surveys. So I can provide some links for you all to just kind of go on and look at, but also would encourage you to just look out there or think about, you know, any surveys that you've worked with to provide some of that information as well. But definitely I would like for us to really be thinking about a framework that we can suggest and move forward and really be able to provide an update during our kind of quarterly check-in, if you will. So other thoughts or questions on campus climate before we move to the next
I
one?
would just like put my support fully behind the splitting it up by department, because I think you should give people who they focus in on and who they are strongest with, let them do it, and then we would agree on who the central cohort to put it all back in, whether that's the Office of the President's website. It wouldn't really fit under student affairs, I don't think fully, because if you're like, here's a student affairs survey with alumni on it, it would like might throw people off. So just like a general, I know however often this website is tracked, we have our 5, what are they called, like goals we want to achieve as a university. One of them is diversity and inclusion. It could be under that tab on that part of the website. But I think specializing on who does what they do best is just working smarter, not harder.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you for that.
I think your participation would be
Brandon?
greater. I agree with Erwan on that too. Participation would be greater on that also, in my opinion.
No, I agree, Lieutenant Washington. I think you're absolutely right. You know, they know their communities and they know who to focus on or what's gonna really get their attention. And so, yeah, I like that idea.
Hey, Brandon, I would just add that if Student Affairs heads up the student survey, we'd want to get some academic partners on there too, just to make sure we get some of the curriculum side of that covered too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Craig. I think that collaboration will be crucial to getting truly getting the information that we want to get, because I think, you know, Craig, you and I have had many conversations about this in the past, and you've been engaged with student affairs. And so we know that the outside of the classroom and the inside of the classroom often overlap and get blurred. And so I think it'll definitely be important for us to work together to make sure we have really the right questions that we're asking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely.
I'm sort of wondering, since this does kind of enter into the area of civil rights and making sure that we are fulfilling our obligations under the law, obviously that wouldn't be, you know, the point. We want to go even further than that. But I'm wondering if some of these surveys, when we're formulating them, you might want to engage the General Counsel's office and make sure that we're covering all the bases that, you know, we really should be shooting for.
Absolutely. Nope, I agree. Thank you for that, Nan. So if we feel like we've exhausted the conversation for now on campus climate, the campus climate survey, it sounds like there is interest and that we do want to include alumni, but we will need to bring another partner to the table to have that conversation to make sure we're not spinning our wheels. So definitely talking to the Alumni Association. We need to look at the different providers for surveys to see what will work best. And I think one of the things that maybe we should do, if we like the idea of splitting this up and letting each focus area really take the lead, do we allow them to choose the survey that they feel works best or the survey that has worked best for them? Certainly, I think we can offer suggestions, but maybe we can meet in the middle there somewhere as well, because if they have a survey that they feel has worked really well and has gotten a good response, then maybe we should consider that as well, but just something to think about. And then I think this goes well into the next bullet, which is really developing that central means of keeping this information. So I mentioned earlier, you know, someone being somewhat of a gatekeeper. I don't think it necessarily has to be one office. Certainly doesn't need to be one individual. That's, I think, what caused us a challenge in tracking down the 2013 survey. We'd love to hear some thoughts on where this should live who maintains it, what's the best way to track progress? Any thoughts from you all on that?
Brandon, hey, it's Craig. Could it all be run through Office of Institutional Research so that it's housed in one place, even if there's different sort of arms of the university supervising or organizing different surveys?
I think that that's a fair ask, and I think something that institutional research is certainly accustomed to and likely comfortable with. Certainly, that is a conversation I'm more than happy to have with them. I'm sure that they would agree, and likely they would probably like to be able to have that information to make sure that it is readily available to all the different constituents. And we know that we have a lot of the survey information and a lot of other demographic and institutional information there anyway. And that's not to say that it also couldn't live in some other places, but I think it definitely will be important for us to have a central place where we can point anyone to who is inquiring about accessing this information. So institutional research was #1 on my list, but certainly I didn't want to be the sole voice and making that call. And I know not everyone on the subcommittee is as familiar with institutional research, but they're the office on campus that they tend to hold a lot of the research-based surveys on campus. They also are directly connected to that survey committee that I referenced earlier that helps us try to avoid the survey fatigue by ensuring that we have a calendar for rolling out these surveys. So we will definitely need to engage them in this conversation anyway to ensure that we are all on the same page of the best time to roll this out. And I think they could also give us some guidance on when we should consider rolling this out based on their experience of getting high response rates.
Hey, Brandon, I just put the link to their site in the chat for everybody if people aren't familiar.
Absolutely. So take a look at that when you get a chance. And it's an updated website. It has a lot of great information there. So I would definitely encourage you to check that out. So as we're thinking about that, if you think that there are other ways to maintain and make this information accessible, please don't hesitate to share that information. So I think the next, oh, go ahead, everyone.
Oh, sorry, Dr. Brown. I just wanted to add one place. I know students where at least recently, because students, at least in a large part, are not looking into the deep sort of routes of the websites that FSU holds, because I know we hold a multitude of them. So just one place, because I agree in being able to not have one person who holds this. So if it's able to just be given to the Torchlight Center, the results of it at least, because that's a very popular website that was a think tank that was created by students for students. And it is what students are knowing best right now, that exists as like the accountability check. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, it was a student created think tank to mostly keep SGA accountable, but it is shifted to just any accountability statistics on the entire school, but it's the one that students know the most. So if they could house that, if it's feasible for their website as well.
Okay, duly noted. I am definitely familiar with it. So, and I know a lot of our students are as well. So good point. So the next one I wanted to talk about was really one that I wanted to get some feedback on, because it's one of the objectives that I think is, it's not as clear. And so I would love to get some thoughts from you all, but it's the objective that states provide a set of concrete achievable actions that will make FSU a more diverse and inclusive community. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to really look at that one and think it through as to what that could mean. But if we're charged with providing this set of concrete achievable actions, what does that look like? What are some of those steps that come to mind that we need to just kind of write down and really start to flush out? Does anybody have any thoughts?
feel like we need to gather data. I think we have some information, the letter signed by the Black faculty. We need to bring all of those pieces of information together and look at those. And I think the survey and the listening sessions will help with that. Because at this point, I don't know what the actions would be. I'm still wrapping my head around. And I would also offer up folks who weren't able to attend last week. Some of those keynote sessions are recorded. And that also gives you a sense of some climate issues. But I think right now we're in this gathering of data or just looking at the data and then figuring out from there. So the second semester is when I'm thinking we can get into those actions that we can take, Brandon. I know that's not answering your question.
No, that's actually fine. So one of the questions I was going to ask a little later, because we really haven't had a chance to discuss this part. So obviously, when you list a set of recommendations or you list a set of objectives, I think it's easy to assume that whatever's first is most important. And in this particular case, I do think that it would be worth us really looking at this list and determining what we want to focus on first. I don't think it's realistic to think we can do all 6 of these at one time. I think there are probably some lower hanging fruit that we could go ahead and address and really focus on. For example, if we know this campus climate survey is something we want to get out sooner rather than later, absolutely, that is something we need to focus on. We need to get it vetted. We need to get all the partners to the table and work with all the different departments on campus to make sure we get this out. Providing a set of achievable actions might be towards the end. Once we've had an opportunity to really vet the other 5 objectives, maybe that will give us or inform whatever this list might be. And so that is certainly something that I've been thinking about. So Roxanne, I'm right there with you. And I think that was why I said that was the one that kind of stumped me. Certainly I have some thoughts of different things we could do on campus, but really thinking about these concrete achievable actions that we would like to put forth as recommendations, I think that's a much bigger question.
I think one of our bullet points can simultaneously answer that bullet point, which is the historical one, which is also something that's on the Black faculty list, which I have pulled up in front of me. And I think that makes it sound simpler than it is, but the bullet point is vague in creating that type of environment. But as you were alluding to, Dr. Bowden, it is the tangible specifics that you would do. And I know to some people, if you say creating a mentorship program between Black faculty and Black students, some people would be like, what do you mean that's achieving this big goal? When you have to realize it is the little steps that do create that goal. So it is the culmination of the first year, hopefully course, not module for students. The mentorship program that even SJ is working on in some capacity, but one specific one for Black faculty, Black staff, Black students. Making NCBI the norm in the environment that everybody is like, oh my, I did NCBI, you did NCBI too? Like, oh my God, we all did it together. And so the cognizance of identity is a basis in who Florida State teaches, hires, staffs, all those types of things. FAMU relationships is huge, I think, in that realm as well, because we sit in a very siloed community at FSU. Across the train tracks is literally figurative in our sense, and highlights gentrification as a whole. So I think the 10 recommendation points that the Black faculty did put out is a really good place to start. And then one of our own answers that own question, which is education, which the history department is working on. So those are really good small places to start that'll culminate the big idea when they are put together.
Thank you, Rawan. I think that's a good point. Go ahead,
I
Nate.
wonder if there might be some projects that we could start to tackle or start to think creatively about within the equity piece of what we're doing. Particularly, it's been a while since I was at FSU, so I don't know if we still have a food pantry. If we, do some things like that, that would not take a survey to kind of figure out and think through and implement, but might make a large impact on, at least to some extent, making an even playing field and giving everybody an equitable chance to succeed.
Absolutely. So I think that's a good point. So when I was thinking about this particular bullet, obviously I thought about it from a student perspective because that's the population that I work with the most. And so when I thought about the achievable actions, one of the things that immediately came to mind is something that we're working on in student affairs, which is hiring a new director to start our diversity, equity, and inclusion office for students. And while that person won't be singularly responsible for making this a more inclusive campus, they will certainly be leading a lot of the efforts and working directly with our students. And so I think about some of those smaller actions that are already in motion that I think we can highlight. We don't have to create those. To your point, Nan, the food pantry is alive and well. The clothing closet is up and running. And all of those are really working towards trying to make this as equitable and inclusive a campus as we possibly can, because we do know that food insecurity is a real challenge that we're dealing with, and our students are not excluded from that challenge just because they're students. Food insecurity and housing insecurity as well. And so absolutely, I think that, those are some things that we can definitely highlight. I also agree with Rawan. I think that there are also others that have already given us a set of achievable actions, or at least from their perception. And so I definitely think that we consider those as well, and consider from our subcommittee, what are ones that we can focus on? What are some that we think fits well within our subcommittee? And Dr. Montgomery, Chair Montgomery really discussed during the last bigger meeting that there is synergy and overlap between some of the subcommittees. And so I don't think that should stop us, but it just means that we need to communicate and make sure we're not being duplicative. But I think we can definitely look at those and see, are there any that really just have some great synergy with the Campus Climate Subcommittee that we could latch onto and really help get over the finish line? So I definitely think that's something we can continue to think about as well.
Brandon, and I see Dr. Montgomery's on as a attendee as well. I just want to push us to be thinking big too, not the systemic and institutional issues that we want to fight. We want to dismantle, and I think we need the synergy across all three subcommittees for that. So with our actions, how can we do that to really change the climate where it's not just kind of a Band-Aid over it? So kind of pushing ourselves to think big, and bringing in the experts on campus and in Tallahassee that can help us to do that as well.
Okay. No, I definitely agree. We want to go big on this one. We certainly want to focus on some of those that we think we can make happen in the next 6 months to 6 years. But we should be focused on all of them. Absolutely. And some of them we know are going to be a heavier lift. And like you said, not only are going to, I think, require the help and work of the three subcommittees, but also collectively this entire university and our community. So definitely something we should be thinking about as well.
Dr. Bowden, do you have a sense of whether we've lost a substantial number of students, staff, faculty because of the economic climate, or do you know if their needs are being met, or if we have lost a significant portion?
So I honestly can't speak to whether we've lost a significant portion. I know from the student realm, that is something that in student affairs, we look closely at along with our peers in undergraduate studies, because in times like this, we tend to lose students for a number of reasons, whether they need to get a job and go help family, whether it's housing or food insecurity, whether it's just purely financial and they just can't stay here. I don't know that I have enough information to say if it's substantial, but we know that we have not been immune to some of the same challenges that other universities have had, and that students and honestly Others as well have had to make some difficult decisions of whether or not to continue their higher education or step away and try to get a job. And so that's something I think I could get that information for you, but I can't say that I have that right at my fingertips right now. But I think that's a great question, especially as we talk about inclusivity and equity. I think that's something we need to be thinking about. I know that I will share that the university as a whole has really worked very hard to specifically meet the needs of some of our students. At the end of the spring semester, right after COVID really started to take its toll, the university underwent a major fundraising campaign with the Great Give that really focused on students. And, you know, we are proud that we were able to give more than $530,000 in direct donations from alumni, donors, and friends to our students to help them with a number of insecurities, whether it was food insecurity, housing insecurity. We were helping students with technology because there was that huge shift into this remote world where students needed laptops, hundreds and hundreds of laptops being provided to students, distance learning technology that students needed. So a number of things. So I think some need has been met, but I certainly wouldn't say that all need has been met. And our students and our faculty and staff alike, I think, continue to have some need, and we continue to try our best to work with them to meet those needs. But I think we still have some work to do, and we still have a ways to go. So the work is not done.
I was going to add on to that. Nan, you say significant, which adds the statistical piece to it. But I also serve on the Diversity and Inclusion Council, and it was brought up in one of our recent meetings. There's a sense that we've lost some really strong talent among staff, particularly staff of color who have left for other positions, and that we don't know exactly why that's happening. So I think the listening sessions, talking to folks who do exit interviews to get a sense of what is happening and why have we lost people, and is there something we could do better at FSU for that? But I know that that's definitely a concern that's come up in Diversity and Inclusion Council that I would love to see our subcommittee look into as well.
Yeah, significant was not the right choice for that. But I also, like, to your point, that's part of why I'm asking about disabilities, not just for those who are disabled alone, but also I'm wondering, are students who are disabled, who are Black, receiving what they need to the same extent as students who are disabled, who are white, or things like that? Like, I'd love for us to include a few questions that at least get us there. You know, the resources that are available at FSU, are they meeting the needs of students across different races, ethnicities, everything equitably?
And I definitely think that's a great question we could take a deeper dive into. I think we have some of that information, but we might have to take a couple of different areas of information and survey information and put it together to really dive a little deeper, because I know our Office of Accessibility Services, OAS, formerly Student Disability Resource Service Center, they collect some of that information from students regarding their experiences on campus. I don't know if they dive deeper into, you know, ethnicity and race, gender. I'm just not sure how granular it gets. And so that's something we can definitely check into. But I definitely know that they survey the students to better understand their experiences on a campus where they are in the minority, and just what it's like to navigate this campus from a physical standpoint, but also from, you know, an academic standpoint, a student support, student activities. Are these events accessible? Are the residence halls accessible? All those different pieces. And so I definitely think that we could find the right people that could get us some of that information for sure. And actually, I just saw a question pop up, and I think it's very timely. It says, as far as diversity and campus climate, are there programs for older continuing study students, those with families and kids? And so I can only speak from my viewpoint. Certainly, I would love to hear from some others about what this looks like from their viewpoint. I know in student affairs, we have been having this conversation for quite some time of how can we better engage our returning students, our older students, because having an event at 10 p.m. at night and a concert, when there are people with families and kids, you have to do something differently. And we've had those same conversations about our transfer students, about our veterans, people who just have different interests and needs. And so we certainly have been looking at different opportunities to have more family-oriented events, and we've done a couple that have been successful. Out at our lakefront property, we've had some events out there where we've encouraged faculty, staff, and students to come out, and it was more of a family day. You can bring your families out. And this isn't exactly the same thing, but we do have a program that we are developing right now. And we have started it, but we continue to build it. And right now it lives within our care program on campus, but it's a program for students with dependents. And these are for our students, our more traditional age college students who have children. So we really have a couple of different groups we need to focus on here. Those students who are first time in college who have children, but also for our continuing studies students that have families and children. I definitely think that is one of the areas where there's a gap and we could be doing more. But as we think about the campus climate, certainly I think that is one of the areas that we should keep in mind as well, of how we meet the needs of that community as well. So other thoughts before we move to the next bullet? Okay, so the next one is one that I definitely think maybe we could throw some ideas out there. So it's to recommend a series of programmatic events focused on anti-racism, equality, and inclusion that really gives us an opportunity to work with Tallahassee Community College and FAMU. I think one of the comments that sticks with me from our first meeting is for us to make sure that we're engaging our partner institutions in conversation prior to make sure that we are doing programs that are welcome and programs that we can both contribute to. I know that in the last 2 weeks, I've had an opportunity to work directly with FAMU. They reached out and wanted to collaborate on an event that really helped to educate our students on how to be safe during protests. It was clear this is a challenge we are all facing on our college campuses. Our students are very active, they're advocating, they're demonstrating, and they know that we share a lot of students. They know that a lot of our students, they live together, they're friends, they're related. And so we certainly appreciated that they reached out, and within 24 hours, we were able to pull a group together, and we got together and had a very good conversation, very informative for our students. We're actually looking to do another one, but really I think the question is, what are some of those other programmatic type of events that you think would be welcome without us having yet reached out to our peers to ask them what kind of events would be welcome? And that's thinking about Tallahassee Community College and FAMU. So what are some programmatic events that you can think of, or even that you've engaged in? Are there any particular events out there that you think could be successful?
Dr. Bowden, for us, Ashton and I, who we had come on the larger meeting a couple of weeks ago, I've been working quite a bit with the student athletes on interactions with police, interactions with on a traffic stop, starting from protests. So we go through, it's a whole spiel, probably about a two-hour block that we're talking about a whole lot. It's in a small block, but it definitely applies to everyone. And we've got something coming up here in November. We're going to do it the day before the election on the 2nd with the student athletes. And these are the type of things that, they're more than welcome. I would love to have not only our student body, but other student bodies, because like you said, it applies. When they go to marches, our students will be there and their students are going to be there. And on for that particular call, we'll have Tallahassee Police Department's chief to talk about, the differences of how to be safe, protest basically the same things that you guys were probably thinking or talking about on y'all's event. So things like that, those are some of the things that we've been doing. We were doing these type of things prior to the George Floyd deal, but we obviously we ramped it up since then, but they definitely could apply to all students. So
I appreciate that, Lieutenant Washington. And I think any opportunity to bring our student athletes together, from the different institutions would be great as well. I don't know how much we do that right now, but if you're able to get the athletes and the police departments all together, I think that would be great.
Well, it's one of those things to where I actually mentioned it to Ashton, where it shouldn't just be for athletes. This should be for all of our student bodies. It applies to staff. It applies to everyone, because even there were a couple members during the presentation. They were saying, wow, I didn't know that. I learned quite a bit. So it applies to like I said, not just the student athletes, but to our students, our staff, to everyone that could definitely learn something from it. So,
Absolutely. So I don't know if there are any other subcommittee members on the line right now. If there have been other programs or events or different things that you've worked on across universities. Any other success stories out there? Something we could really kind of look at expanding, or something you've been thinking about?
Brandon, or Dr. Brown, I'm sorry. It's so hard to plan during COVID because there are live big events that we've done across the university. But I'm wondering if there's something like a town hall where we invite leadership from all three schools. Students, faculty, and staff are welcome to kind of pose questions, and there's a facilitator, and maybe it focuses on race, as Lieutenant Washington's bringing up about the protest, like the timeliness of it, and just hold this kind of forum, or maybe it's an event like that. I know that we have done Laurel Fulkerson and Jan Kistner have worked on a couple women's leadership across all three institutions. We've done a couple, I think specifically for STEM women, but it might be women in higher education. So those folks have done work across all three institutions, but they were always events in person, and it was a large crowd. And then the other connection that we have, FSU, TCC, and I believe FAMU do the Science Festival together, and TCC leads that. So those are all events that I know about. But again, huge events in the time of COVID that might not be happening for the foreseeable future. But those are some events, and I can get you in contact or do the reconnaissance on those events if you'd like.
Absolutely. Well, and Roxanne, you bring up an important point there. I do want to acknowledge the extra layer of difficulty and challenge that COVID brings to trying to build these collaborations and partnerships. But we have had some success in doing these events via Zoom, and actually some of the positives of that is that people who otherwise couldn't attend because it was on Zoom was able to at least attend for a portion. So we have been able to hit a different population who they couldn't necessarily make it out to an event, but being able to sit down and open up their computer and engage. And so maybe when this is all said and done, we do both because obviously Zoom fatigue is real as well, but maybe we find a healthy balance of doing both to reach as many people as we can. Go ahead, Nan.
I love the idea of special training and talking about how to safely protest and what your rights are and things like that. I think that's a great idea. And I think a lot of different groups would love that. I also wanted to, I hope this is appropriate time, but to bring up a potential partner or something. and I don't know what the programming would look like entirely, but I am on a special counsel for Leadership Florida for race, ethnicity, and inclusion. And the president of the Florida Association of Counties reached out, and she had their executive director reach out to me because I was just advertising that we were doing this. And they said they would be really interested in speaking with somebody about how they might be able to assist or be involved. So I don't know what that would end up looking like, but if you wouldn't mind if I give them your information or let me know who I should touch base with for that. The other thing, I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm not on campus most of the time during the day, but I don't know what kind of speaker series FSU has right now, but when we were in college, we had the Vision speaker series. And the whole point of it was to, instead of having a bunch of little speakers, like disjointed speakers, we brought the whole campus together to have really huge, impactful speakers. Like we had Maya Angelou came, and it was just amazing. And I literally was talking to Gene Axios about it last week because it was so amazing. So, you know, I don't know if we're already doing that, but if we're not, maybe something, you know, just really powerful speakers that the students wouldn't have access to, but for their association with with Florida State.
Absolutely. So Nan, I am proud to report that that speaker series still exists. It goes by a different name now. It is now the Golden Tribe Lecture Series, and it is still alive and well. I am curious to know how they're going to do it in this virtual world. Some others have had success with having speakers come into this virtual space and people could log in and listen. But you're absolutely right. We've had some amazing speakers come through, and if not for the relationship with Florida State and our partners, students would not have access to hear these speakers. And I am proud to share that we do open that up to the community and our partner institutions to attend as well. It gets a little tricky because it gets into the nuances of A&S fees and making sure our students who have IDs get in, but we do always make sure we hold seats to ensure that our community and specifically some of our affinity groups and other partner groups that we work with in the city, like the Human Relations Council for the city of Tallahassee, the Black Alumni Association, our FAMU partners, our TCC partners. And so that is definitely something I think we will continue. And I think it's actually something we can continue to build on. We last did it or at least the last larger one that we did was actually this past January for the MLK celebration. We brought Karamo Brown, who is a FAMU grad. He's from Queer Eye. And I mean, we had probably a couple hundred people outside trying to get in. And so we packed out Ruby Diamond Auditorium. And so I think we could do that more. And students help choose the speakers. And it is meant to bring a diverse group of speakers to engage our students. And it's also just a way for us to connect to the community as well. So we do advertise that widely. And so I definitely think that's something we can continue to do as well and continue to grow.
Do we have, I'm so glad that you guys still have that. That's awesome. Do we have a book festival or a film festival or a food and wine festival or anything like that? I'm wondering, because I actually chaired a Jewish book festival and we have a Jewish film festival, and that's a great way to learn about other cultures and your community and stuff like that. Do we have anything like that?
So if I'm not mistaken, and I certainly will let some others speak to this, but if I'm not mistaken, we have a number of film festivals on campus. I know that we have a Veterans Film Festival. I know we have a French Film Festival, Middle Eastern Film Festival, and I believe there are quite a few others as well. So we do have a number of film festivals. I think we also have an International Film Festival as well. I think it's just a matter of really getting the word out. I mean, one of the biggest challenges we have is just advertising and marketing and making sure students know and faculty and staff as well know what is available out there. One of the things I definitely want to make sure I mention as well, and I see it pop up here in the chat, we are bringing back our One Book, One Campus initiative that it's been going for a few years, but very successful in the past. So that's something we're actively working on right now, where, you know, you have this, this big book conversation. So we're choosing the book right now. I didn't make the last meeting, so I don't know where we are in that process, but we are bringing it back, and we're really excited that we're going to be able to offer that to our students as well. And then also, it's probably worth mentioning Word of South as well, as a popular event that we have here. I believe the last couple of years have been at Cascades Park. So we have a number of events that are meant to be entertaining, but also educational, also engaging, but also open to including really all the members of the Tallahassee community. You know, we know we have roughly 70,000 students between the three institutions, but we also engage within this Leon County and Tallahassee. And, you know, obviously always thinking about town and gown relations and thinking about how we can continue to build better relationships with our surrounding community. So definitely something that we'll continue to look into as well.
Do we have a calendar that's a central source for all those things, like every event that has to do with equity inclusion or diversity inclusion put on there?
You know, we have a central calendar. I don't know that it's broken down like that, but that is a great idea.
You know what I mean? Like anybody who's doing an event where that's one of the goals or that's one of the possibilities could be on a specific calendar, and then you can push that out like as part of your advertisement.
I know that it has the ability to filter. I just don't know what the categories are. So I will make a note to look at that. But you can definitely filter the types of events, but I don't know that it breaks it down enough to say, if I'm looking for a DNI related event, you know, show me the calendar. But calendar.fsu.edu is our central calendar for campus. And we also have several other means of getting that information out as well. But yeah, I can definitely look into that. I think that'd be a great idea. If you're looking specifically for that, if you can click a button and it pulls up all those events, that'd be great.
Yeah, and like, well, particularly I'm thinking as like almost a PR piece. So part of getting our message that FSU is inclusive and that this is something that we value out to people by putting that in their face and making sure that they know these things are going on.
I am writing it down. Absolutely. Okay. Duly noted. Let me check the chat right quick. I think there was a question. Okay, so I know we're coming up on 4:30 here, so I did want to go over the last two bullets right quick to get some thoughts, and then I have a question that I want to ask at the end. So this one, Lieutenant Washington, I would love to hear your thoughts as well. So this bullet is to work with FSUPD to learn what types of trainings, specifically any anti-bias, anti-racism trainings that they currently engage in, and then see if we need to further that conversation to talk about any recommendations we might have. And so Lieutenant Washington, I definitely would love to have FSUPD's trainer come and talk, but I was wondering if you could just share with the subcommittee and those who are on today, give us a little insight into some of the trainings that happen.
Well, what we do, basically, it's an online portion. When we bring guys in for our 16 weeks in-house training, obviously there's a block to where they talk about, you know, the diversity side, ethics, morals, so on and so forth. However, I will be as honest with you as I can. I have told Chief Brown that, you know, I believe that, listen, we need to increase and do more of our training because it is dated and there's some things that need to be updated. I'm a trainer myself. I train quite a bit, not only defensive tactics, firearms, driving, all of that stuff. And so I have the experience also to speak to that. But what we do currently, it's an online portion to where it goes through, talks about, you know, traffic stops on why, the ethics, the morals on why, you know, it's obviously not correct or not right for you or officers to implicitly bias or just stereotypical, just profile folks, if you will, for race, color, creed, whatever you may have you. And so obviously there's another block where we talk about that also in the training portion, as to why it's not acceptable. But like I said, there's some portions in it that, like I said, as a trainer, I have, raised my hand and say, hey, we need to definitely improve on some things. But I will say, as an agency, comparing our agencies to other agencies across the state, we do a lot more training than other agencies do. And so not to brag, but to brag, it's one of those things to where we can say, hey, the requirements are this, the requirements are 4 hours, but we're doing 10, and that's not as a whole. I'm talking in that block as far as 10. The requirements are, the only thing that the state requires is for you to do 2 hours of human diversity training, every 2 years. That's what they require, which definitely, in my opinion, it's just not enough. And along with, I just feel like there needs to be some scenario-based training also involved in that, of not just a click of the button and to say, okay, well, hey, I've done it. You just open the screen, let it run, and say, hey, I'm done with this training. That, to me, that's definitely not good enough.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. And Lieutenant Washington, I think there are also some other efforts that have been going on with FSU PD that a lot of people just don't know about. And in a completely separate conversation earlier with Chief Brown on a different topic that wasn't related to the subcommittee, one of the things we talked about was how to better inform our students and faculty and staff of all the great things that FSU PD is doing. For example, the report cards. A lot of people don't even know that exists, and the other efforts that have been made to include students and other community members as, in terms of conversations that are happening within the police department. I know you all also invite staff and students to be part of your search committees when you're hiring new officers. And I just think that a lot of times people don't know about that. So I know one of the things that we talked about as well was simply that communication piece and trying to figure out a way to make sure we are able to share that information with the greater community so that they know what is happening.
Absolutely. And like I said, it's great to have the support of Chief Brown to basically go in and say, hey, we're doing a great job, but there are some things that we can improve upon. And so the report card piece, it's big. And like I said, it's one of those things that we're doing. We're open about it. We try to be just transparent. That's the biggest thing of saying, hey, we have nothing to hide. If you've got issues, if you've got concerns, let's talk about it. If an officer violated you and you feel like you want to file a complaint, okay, let's talk about it. This is the process. This is how we go about it. And even if it's me, same rules apply. Holding me accountable. That's one of the things that, we preach and teach all the time of just saying, okay, even if it's me, you hold me accountable, same as you would anyone else. And so, like I said, you don't want to brag, but I do brag that it's a great agency, but we definitely got some things that we can improve upon, but we're doing a lot of great things here at the FSU Police Department.
Absolutely. No, Lieutenant Washington, I appreciate you sharing that. That's good information for us to know, and I think definitely can help us, determine which direction we need to go in terms of, how it relates to that particular objective. Yeah, and in regards to training, as far as bringing the training guys in, I'd be happy to do it. It's just I don't know how effective that would be. To look at what we learned, because like I said, it's an online portion. And like I said, I think the good part or the constructive part where you guys could come in and say, okay, well, if this is what an officer's learning, these are the things that, I would like to see. So I think that will be helpful from that aspect. Okay. So like I said, if that's something you guys want to take advantage of, I'll be glad to set it up. Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. And then the final bullet is to work with the history department on the first year learning module. This is one that, as you can see from the objective, this is something that is already happening. The work is already happening. The history department is moving forward. I think it would probably benefit us to really just have an opportunity to hear from the committee that is working on that, where they are in the process. I think that also overlaps with our historical legacy committee. So there might be an opportunity maybe where we all get together and hear, or maybe we have someone come and address this subcommittee, so we can hear and just understand a little bit better what efforts are being made, if there's any support we can provide as a subcommittee, or if this is one where we wait a little bit for them to continue to flesh this out so we can better understand. And so it looks like that presentation will be next week with the historical legacy subcommittee. So as I have always done, I would encourage you to attend all the subcommittees, but in particular, because this one I think has some synergy with the work that we will be looking to do, I would definitely encourage you to, if you have the opportunity, to sit in on the historical legacy subcommittee next week. That is on Wednesday at 3 o'clock as well. So definitely think about that and consider that so that we can get that information. I know everyone won't be able to make it, so we can definitely get some information that we can also bring back to this committee and share some more specifics. I know that I'm going to make every effort to be there so I can listen in because I'm very, very interested as well. There was one question that popped up in the chat that I found very interesting, and I did want to bring it back to the group. And it goes back to bullet 1, which is campus climate survey. And this relates to a population that we did not discuss, and that's our virtual students, and how we would even engage them, because we're calling something a campus climate survey. That might not necessarily speak to them just because of the language that is being used. They don't necessarily see themselves on campus and might not even know that they need to even complete the survey. So nothing I think we need to flush out right this second, but definitely another community that I think we need to be thinking about. How do we engage that community and better understand their experiences and how they navigate Florida State as well in this virtual environment, but they are still Florida State University students. And I don't know how far we go, but I also think about our other campuses. We are the Tallahassee campus. We are not the only campus, and so as we think about this, let's think about that as well. And so I did want to check real quick, because I do have kind of a closing question, if you will, for the group. But I wanted to check in real quick and just see, are there any other thoughts or anything we didn't cover? I've been taking copious notes. I know Jimmy is helping to take some notes as well on things that we need to follow up on and some of our homework. We can make sure we get that out to the subcommittee as well. But are there any other thoughts or anything we didn't cover today that you wanted to make sure we covered? Go ahead, Nan.
I have a thought, and I'm really not sure how this would look on a college campus, so I don't know if you've had experience with this before, but the whole process of truth and reconciliation, it seems to be remarkably healing for communities. And I think, as we see in social media accounts where people are able to voice things that have happened to them, there seems to still be a need for that, and a desire to have an audience to hear your grievances and hear what you've experienced. And I'm just wondering if in something that we're doing, we might be able to incorporate some sort of truth and reconciliation, some sort of story hearing somewhere. I'm not sure where though. And I don't know, maybe there are other universities that have already done it.
Right. So Nan, I think that's a good point. And I do think that resonates with many others on campus right now. I know specifically in our Center for Leadership and Social Change, this is a conversation that they've been having. And the language looks a little different. So some people say truth and reconciliation. Some look at restorative justice. So some similar pieces there in terms of an opportunity to sit down with someone and really kind of share your story about how you've been impacted or something that has impacted you. And there are two components. There's having an opportunity to talk directly to someone who has impacted you. And then there's also just really the opportunity to be heard. and just share with others, not necessarily the specific individual responsible for the pain, but just an opportunity to share that story. So I do think that there is some interest on campus. It is likely that there is interest from others outside of the Center for Leadership and Social Change, but I definitely think that that is of interest and something that others would want to talk about a little bit more. And so if we think there is an opportunity to put this in here, you know, I wonder, could we not have a programmatic event with FAMU that talks about that? We certainly know that there's some history between the two institutions. You know, many students don't know the history. Well, many faculty and staff might not know the history as well. But, you know, maybe we could tie that into some of our other objectives. But as a standalone, maybe that is something we could put in here as an objective of this group.
Yeah, I think, you know, even for students that haven't had those experiences themselves, to have your mind open to what your fellow students are carrying with them to the classroom, to the university, would be valuable on both ends, I think.
Absolutely. And I have another comment here that in addition to the FSU Alumni Association, also including our other alumni network groups and our DSO board members and members of other task force councils and boards. So these are all people who are heavily engaged, who care a lot about this university. And so I definitely think if there's an opportunity to engage them, we certainly should. I think at the end of the day, we all have the same goal, and that's to help Florida State University be the best university it can be and the most inclusive community and environment that we can be as well. So I definitely think we all have a common goal, and any opportunity to bring them to the table, I think is something we should consider as well. So any other thoughts before I pose our kind of closing question? All right, hearing none. What I would really love to know from the group, and maybe we spend the next 5 minutes talking about this. I didn't want to bring anybody in for this particular meeting because I really wanted an opportunity to talk about campus climate and pose some of these questions. But as we think about our next meeting and we get a little deeper into this and start doing the work, who do we need to hear from? Is there someone we can invite to share information with us? Is there someone that you're curious about, you would love to hear more from, that isn't currently part of the subcommittee, but or just someone you've been working with that you really think this subcommittee could benefit from hearing some information from them? Is there anyone that we can be reaching out to?
Just so you don't feel, Dr. Bowden, like you're being ignored, I sent a list to Jimmy a few weeks back, so he has some of my suggestions.
Awesome, I appreciate that. I'm okay with the awkward silence though. I do it in my classes all the time. It really doesn't bother me at all. I appreciate it. So, and just so you know, Roxanne, I did see that list. So I think, I wish I had it at my fingertips so I could pull it up and drop it in the chat. But yes, I did get a chance to glance at that. But anybody else, is there anyone, any particular group or someone just doing great work that you feel really could just share some information with us? You know, Lieutenant Washington, I appreciate that insight on the training piece, because I think hearing that feedback, it makes a little more sense to maybe take a different approach to that, and maybe looking at the training piece a little bit different instead of having a trainer come in and just tell us this is what the module looks like. You know, maybe we find an opportunity for someone to actually see the module and be able to give feedback. So maybe that looks a little different. Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I was just gonna, I don't know much about it, and it's structured this way, obviously, but I mean, we have a FAMU FSU College of Engineering, and I know it just moved up significantly in the rankings. So I'm wondering if Dean Gibson, if there might be anything that could be shared based on best practices or things that are taking place related there when we already have FAMU and FSU, you know, involved together.
Absolutely. So Roxanne, I didn't know if you had any specific thoughts on that. I know isn't that the world you live in out there? Somewhat, kind of, sort of, mag lavish next door.
Yes. Yeah, I think that there's some definite connections. I'll have to think on that. I tend to write my thoughts down in emails. That's why Dr. Bowden and Jimmy get a lot of emails from me.
Love getting emails from you, Roxanne, anytime. Absolutely. So any other thoughts? And Rawan, I don't want to put you on the spot, but from a student perspective, do you think there's any particular person you think the students want to hear from, that maybe they want to get more information? Anybody jumping out at you?
The only thing that's going through my mind, and I took a screenshot of her name just because she did stick with me and I'd have to see more. I believe it was just FAMU's diversity inclusion office had a strike out event where they brought a lot of people into one room a couple of weeks ago, and I was texting other SJ students at the time. I was like, I don't know who's tuned into this call, but this call is very impactful because they were talking with Sheriff Norvell, and they were talking with FAMU director, alumni and lawyers as well. And there's this one woman, again, I have her name and I can send it to you, but she was bringing this perspective that I know a lot of students like to hear, and however pertinent it is to our subcommittee. It was a generational conversation because it was hosted by FAMU students, and she's an adult lawyer. She was referring to herself as Gen X, and it was basically this conversation bridging the generational divide, because I feel like a lot of students are like empowered in their own student space, and it doesn't have to be her specifically, but I know this is what speaks to students, at least right now. She was saying, like, and the most beautiful terms, this is why I was so, excited to be at this event. She's like, we have to realize that it has to be on the onus on adults to realize that the way that young students organize is different than how we did it, but it doesn't mean that it's different in a bad way. And it should be this coinciding of the old with the new. They were, of course, specifically talking about, Black organizers, how being rooted in the NAACP 20 years ago is the commonality, whereas students today, we don't find that root in one community organization. We just go and do our thing. And it was just the general gist of what I'm trying to say is, like, the generational conversation of understanding and not, this is what you need to do, children, is what really reaches through to students. And it really reached out to me as well, because sometimes students, at least myself, I feel like, well, do I need to be more involved in the NAACP to get something done? Do I need to hone in to what was being done 30 years ago to feel like I can do anything now? Because I feel like when we just go out into the streets or do whatever we're doing, it doesn't hit enough walls. So the generational conversation hits students, I think, very hard as well. I can get you her name specifically, but that generational divide. Well, who was coming to my mind, I know he did leave us, unfortunately, at FSU, Miguel Hernandez as well, as always. But
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Rawan. So any other last thoughts before we adjourn for today? I want to make sure I get all thoughts. All right. Well, hearing none, we will adjourn this meeting at 4:43. And just want to remind everyone, the task force email and website is on the screen for those who are interested. That's where all the pertinent information goes. So please feel free to check that, and we will make sure all that information is updated. But otherwise, subcommittee, I appreciate your time. And as always, I am looking forward to the next time we can get together. And so if there are no other thoughts, we are officially adjourned. Thank you.
thanks so much, everyone.
Absolutely.